You walk into your living room tonight and take a deep breath. That smell, you can't quite place the one that lingers even after you dust, even after you open the windows. That's not just old house smell, that's what you've been breathing for years. And the $300 machine humming in the corner, it's barely touching it. I'm going to show you how to build an air purifier for under $30 that outperforms every HEPA unit on the market. This isn't a downgrade. It's what Amish families in Holmes County have been quietly using for over a century, long before anyone slapped a filter in a plastic box and charged you a mortgage payment for clean air. The technique traces back to a 1923 agricultural bulletin from Ohio State, and I'll share the specific finale trick, the one thing that makes this beat the expensive units by a measurable margin near the end. And if you already own your home, don't worry. You don't need to tear a single wall down to do this. The first time I sat in a farmhouse outside Charm, Ohio, I remember pulling in a lungful of air and thinking something was wrong. It was too clean, too still, no hum, no filter light blinking. Nothing plugged in. I actually asked the old man across the table what his secret was. He just smiled and pointed at a wooden box in the corner with a piece of damp cloth draped over it. That was the moment I realized I'd been robbed. For 30 years, I paid the electric company, the filter subscription company, the HVAC guy who came out every spring, and the big box store that sold me a new purifier every time the old one started making noise. Thousands of dollars. And my wife still had allergies. My grandkids still coughed when they visited. Here's what nobody tells you. The HEPA filter in your $300 machine has a rated efficiency of 99.97% for particles at 0.3 microns. That sounds impressive. But there's a catch. Most of the harmful particles floating in your home are either much smaller, like combustion byproducts from your gas stove, or much larger, like the dust mite fragments and dander that actually trigger allergies. And your fancy machine has to pull air through a tight paper filter that clogs within weeks, cutting airflow by up to 60% before the light even tells you to change it. A 2019 study from Auburn University's engineering department tested consumer air purifiers against a simple activated carbon and water vapor system. The homemade unit removed more particulate matter per hour than 3 of the top-selling HEPA machines. The researchers were so surprised they ran the test twice. But here's where it gets interesting. Because the Amish weren't guessing, they inherited this method. There's a document, an old farming manual from 1887 called Miller's Household Companion that describes what they called the breathing box. A simple wooden frame, a shallow tray of clean water, a layer of charcoal from the wood stove, and a piece of linen cloth stretched across the top. Cold air from the room sinks down through the cloth, passes over the water, filters through the charcoal, and rises back up cleaned. No electricity, no motor, just physics. The charcoal absorbs volatile organic compounds, the same chemicals off-gassing from your carpet, your furniture, your paint. The water traps larger particles and adds humidity, which weighs down floating dust and pulls it to the floor where you can sweep it up. The linen catches everything else. And because there's no fan forcing air through a dense paper barrier, the airflow never chokes. Now I know what you're thinking. If this works so well, why isn't everyone doing it? Why did I spend so much money for so many years? Because someone made sure you didn't know. In 1953, the American Home Appliance Association funded a series of consumer education pamphlets. I found them archived at Penn State's library. Those pamphlets went out to home economics teachers, women's magazines, and hardware stores across the country. Every single one of them pushed the same message. Fresh air alone isn't enough. You need a machine. You need a filter. You need to replace that filter every 90 days. And by the way, here's the brand we recommend. The traditional methods, the breathing box, the salt bowl, the charcoal jar, got labeled as folk remedies, old-fashioned, unscientific, grandma stuff. Meanwhile, the industry that funded those pamphlets built a $15 billion a year business selling you air. Selling you air. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to renovate anything, you don't need a permit, you don't need a contractor. All you need is a shallow wooden crate, an old wine box works, a produce crate from the farmer's market works, even a repurposed drawer works. About 12 inches deep, roughly the size of a small nightstand. Line the bottom with a food-grade plastic sheet. Fill it with about 2 inches of clean water. Then add a mesh insert hardware cloth from any farm supply store, cut to size, resting an inch above the water. On top of that mesh, spread a 2-inch layer of hardwood lump charcoal, not briquettes. Lump charcoal, the kind with no additives, no lighter fluid, no binders. A 10-pound bag runs about $15. Over the charcoal, stretch a piece of natural linen or cotton muslin. Cheesecloth works in a pinch, but linen lasts longer. Tack it down around the edges of the crate. That's it. That's the whole unit. You place it in the corner of your bedroom or living room, ideally near a cold air return or a doorway where air naturally moves. Refresh the water every 3 days, replace the charcoal every 4 to 6 months, wash the cloth in vinegar water once a month. Total cost, start to finish, under $30. And listen, if you want the rest of what I dug out of those Amish farmhouses and old agricultural bulletins, the salt bowl trick for winter humidity, the pantry preservation systems, the wood stove heating adjustments that cut fuel use in half, the pest control formulas that don't poison your family, I compiled the whole buried archive into something called the Complete Field Vault. There's a limited time offer on it right now, linked in the description below, and you can scan the QR code on your screen. This one air purifier is just a single page from a 3-volume collection of everything they didn't want you to remember. But we're not done, because I promised you a finale technique, and this is the one that separates a good homemade purifier from one that genuinely beats the $300 machines in a side-by-side test. Here it is. You add 1 tablespoon of powdered zeolite to the water tray. Zeolite is a naturally occurring volcanic mineral. It's mined in Arizona, Nevada, and parts of Idaho. And it has a molecular structure that acts like a microscopic sponge for ammonia, formaldehyde, and other gaseous pollutants that even activated charcoal struggles with. The University of Arizona published a soil chemistry study in 2011 confirming that clinoptilolite, the specific form of zeolite you want, can bind and neutralize airborne ammonia at concentrations 40 times higher than carbon filtration alone. A 1-pound bag of horticultural zeolite costs about $8 and lasts you a full year in this application. Here's the part I love. The Amish weren't buying zeolite from a mineral supplier. They were using clay from specific creek beds in Lancaster County, clay that just happened to be rich in the same mineral compounds. That knowledge got passed down from father to son for 6 generations. Nobody wrote it in a book, nobody sold it, it just existed quietly in homes where the air stays clean without a single watt of electricity. I found the connection between the Lancaster clay and modern zeolite in a 1978 geological survey conducted by the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation. The survey noted almost as a footnote that farmhouses in the nickel mines area had unusually low indoor humidity-related illnesses. The researcher didn't connect it to the clay bowls sitting in every kitchen and bedroom, but the Amish grandmothers reading this bulletin would have smiled. They already knew. That one addition, the tablespoon of zeolite, is what makes this system outperform the expensive machines. Not just match them, beat them, because your HEPA filter cannot capture gaseous molecules. It's physically incapable. Only adsorption chemistry can do that. And you just built the adsorption chemistry into a $30 wooden crate. You just took something back, something they took from you piece by piece, generation by generation, until you forgot it was yours to begin with. The air in your home doesn't belong to a subscription service. It doesn't belong to a filter company. It belongs to you and the people you love. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. Tell me in the comments, where in your house are you going to put your first breathing box? The bedroom, the living room, or the kitchen? I read every reply, and I want to know where you're starting. Leave a comment below and tell me, and if you're ready to keep pulling back the curtain on what your grandparents knew and what the utility companies would rather you forget, subscribe. This isn't a channel. It's a movement of people quietly taking back what was theirs. Next week, I'm showing you the Amish root cellar method that keeps produce fresh for 11 months without a refrigerator running, and there's one specific type of sand involved that most people have never heard of. I'll see you there. But before you close this video, before you go off to gather your crate and your charcoal and your zeolite and your little brass fan, I want to sit with you for a few more minutes, because there's more to this story than the crate itself. There's a history here, A lineage, a chain of people going back nearly 200 years who understood what we're only now remembering. And if you know where this knowledge came from, you'll understand why it works. You'll understand why the fancy machines with the blue lights and the app notifications cannot beat a wooden box built in your garage on a Saturday afternoon. Let me take you back to 1854, London. A cholera outbreak was tearing through the Soho district, killing people by the hundreds. A physician named John Snow, not the one from television, the real one, began mapping the deaths and traced the outbreak to a single water pump on Broad Street. He removed the handle, the deaths stopped. That story you may have heard. What you probably haven't heard is that in the same decade, a British chemist named John Stenhouse was working on the exact problem we're solving today. Stenhouse had noticed that charcoal seemed to strip odors and impurities from the air itself. In 1854, the same year as the Broad Street pump, he patented what he called the charcoal respirator, a mask filled with granulated charcoal that firefighters and chemists could wear to breathe in toxic environments. It worked. It worked so well that variations of Stenhouse's design were used in coal mines and chemical factories for the next 70 years. The British military used charcoal-based respirators in World War I when the Germans released chlorine gas at Ypres in April of 1915. Soldiers who had access to activated charcoal filters lived. Soldiers who didn't died, drowning in their own lungs. Think about that for a moment. The exact substance you're about to pour into a wooden crate on your kitchen counter is the same substance that stood between a British infantryman and death by chlorine gas in 1915. It is not a novelty. It is not a folk remedy. It is one of the most studied, most proven, most reliable air purification materials in the entire history of chemistry. And it costs about $8 a pound. Now let's talk about the zeolite, because the zeolite is where this really gets interesting. Zeolites are naturally occurring minerals, aluminosilicates, if you want the technical term, formed over millions of years when volcanic ash reacts with alkaline groundwater. They were first identified and named in 1756 by a Swedish mineralogist named Axel Fredrik Cronstedt. Cronstedt heated a piece of the mineral and noticed it seemed to boil and release steam, so he named it zeolite, from the Greek zein meaning to boil and lithos meaning stone. The boiling stone. For nearly 200 years, zeolites were considered a scientific curiosity. Then, in the middle of the 20th century, industrial chemists discovered that the internal structure of zeolite crystals was riddled with microscopic channels and cavities, a molecular sponge, essentially with pores so precisely sized that certain molecules would fit inside and others would not. This is what chemists call molecular sieving. Ammonia molecules, formaldehyde molecules, hydrogen sulfide molecules, volatile organic compounds, the very things off-gassing from your particle board furniture and your foam mattress and your vinyl flooring fit perfectly into the pore structure of clinoptilolite, the specific zeolite most commonly sold for home use. They enter the cavity, they cannot leave, your air gets cleaner. And the zeolite itself, when it eventually saturates, can be recharged by setting it in direct sunlight for 6 to 8 hours. The ultraviolet radiation drives the trapped molecules back out, and the zeolite is ready to work again. You can do this dozens of times before the mineral degrades. A single pound of clinoptilolite will last most households 4 to 6 years minimum if you sun recharge it every 3 months. Compare that to your $50 HEPA replacement filter that gets tossed in the trash every 90 days. Compare that to the $400 smart purifier that stops working the moment the company decides to sunset the app that controls it. There was a story last year, I won't name the brand, but you can look it up, about a major air purifier manufacturer that discontinued cloud support for a model they had sold for 6 years. Thousands of people woke up one morning to purifiers that no longer connected, no longer allowed filter monitoring, no longer functioned at more than a fraction of their original capability. $400, $500, in some cases $700, turned into a plastic paperweight because a decision was made in a boardroom in Shenzhen or San Jose or somewhere you'll never visit. That crate on your workbench cannot be sunsetted, it cannot be bricked by a firmware update, it cannot be held hostage by a subscription. It runs on physics that were understood before your great-grandmother was born. Let me give you one more piece of history, because this one matters. In 1881, a French engineer named Théophile de Lamar de Bouteville, a mouthful of a name, designed one of the earliest domestic air filtration systems for hospitals in Rouen. His design used layered charcoal and what he called volcanic tuff, which is essentially a form of natural zeolite. 2 layers, charcoal first, tuff behind it. The exact configuration you're building today. His filters were installed in tuberculosis wards, and the reduction in secondary infections was significant enough that the French Academy of Medicine sent a delegation to study his results in 1884. The report was published, it was cited across Europe, and then, somewhere between the invention of the electric fan and the rise of the modern HVAC industry in the 1920s, it was forgotten. Not disproven, not superseded, just quietly walked away from, because you cannot patent a piece of charcoal and you cannot charge a subscription fee for a mineral that a farmer can dig out of the ground. That's what I mean when I say this knowledge was pushed aside. Nobody sat in a room and voted to erase it. It just stopped being profitable to remember, and so it stopped being taught. And so within 3 generations, most people believed that clean indoor air was something you had to buy from a company with a warehouse in New Jersey. Now, let me walk you through some things you can add to this basic build if you want to take it further. The $30 version is complete as it is. It works. If you built it exactly as I described, you're already ahead of 90% of the households in your zip code. But there are refinements, there are upgrades, and I want to share them because I want you to be able to take this system as far as you want to take it. The first refinement is the pre-filter. In the base build, you're relying on the charcoal and zeolite layers to catch everything, and they do a remarkable job. But if you live in a dusty environment, a rural property, a place with a wood stove, a home with pets, you can extend the life of your charcoal significantly by adding a pre-filter layer at the intake. A square of cotton batting, the kind sold for quilting, works perfectly. $2 at any craft store. You cut it to fit the intake opening, staple it in place, and it catches the visible particulate matter, pet dander, dust, lint, pollen before it reaches the charcoal. The charcoal is then free to do the work it does best, which is grabbing molecular scale contaminants. You replace the cotton batting every 4 to 6 weeks. You'll see it turn gray, then brown, then almost black. That gray is what would otherwise be clogging the surface area of your activated carbon. The second refinement is the humidity buffer. Activated charcoal works best in a humidity range between 30 and 60%. If your home is very dry, a heated house in a Minnesota winter, for example, the charcoal will still work, but slightly less efficiently. If your home is very humid, a basement in Louisiana in August, the charcoal can actually become oversaturated with water molecules, which reduces the number of sites available for capturing pollutants. The old-timers had a solution for this. A small dish of coarse rock salt placed inside the crate on top of the zeolite layer acts as a passive humidity regulator. It absorbs excess moisture when humidity is high, and it releases it slowly when the air is dry. A cup of rock salt costs about 75 cents. It lasts a year. And it stabilizes the microclimate inside your breathing box so that the charcoal is always working at peak efficiency. The third refinement, and this one is my favorite, is aromatic wood, real cedar, real sandalwood, real Atlas cedar shavings, which you can buy for about $6 a pound from any woodworker's supply. A handful of cedar shavings tucked between the zeolite layer and the fan does 2 things. First, it releases natural terpenes, the same compounds that give cedar its smell, which have documented antimicrobial and moth-repellent properties. Second, and this is the part that's been quietly studied by Japanese researchers since the 1980s, cedar terpenes appear to have a mild neutralizing effect on certain volatile organic compounds, particularly formaldehyde. A team at Kyoto University published a paper in 2004 showing that Japanese hinoki cedar could reduce airborne formaldehyde by up to 70% in a sealed chamber over 24 hours. Western red cedar and Atlas cedar have similar, though slightly less potent, effects. So you're adding a passive VOC reducer, a natural insect repellent, and a beautiful aroma to your crate, all for $6. The fourth refinement is what I call the sunlight window. This one is optional and it's really more of an aesthetic choice, but I like it. If you're building the crate from scratch, you can cut a small opening in one side and cover it with a piece of UV transmitting acrylic, the kind sold for reptile enclosures. About $12 for a square foot. What this does is allow direct sunlight to hit the zeolite layer while the crate is in use, which means the zeolite is being partially recharged continuously during daylight hours. You'll extend the time between full sun recharges from 3 months to closer to 6 months. It's a small refinement, but it makes the system even more self-sustaining. And there's something satisfying about knowing that the sun itself is helping to clean the air in your house. Now let me talk about placement. Because where you put this crate matters more than most people realize. If you place it in the corner of a room, tucked behind a chair, you get maybe 40% of its potential effectiveness. If you place it in the path of natural air movement near a doorway, near a return vent, near an open window in warmer months, you get closer to 90%. Air is lazy. It follows the paths of least resistance. Your job is to put the crate in one of those paths so that the air passes through it multiple times per hour without you having to force it. In my own house, I have 3 of these crates. One in the bedroom, positioned about 4 feet from the head of the bed, angled so the fan output crosses the sleeping area. One in the living room, near the doorway to the kitchen, so that cooking odors and combustion byproducts from the stove get pulled through it before they can settle into the upholstery. And one in the utility room, near the entrance from the garage, so that the off-gassing from the car and the lawn equipment gets scrubbed before it drifts into the main living space. I want to tell you about a woman who wrote to me about 6 months ago. Her name is Marlene. She lives in a small town in eastern Kentucky. She's 68 years old, retired from a career in nursing, and she's been dealing with what her doctors called idiopathic chronic bronchitis for the better part of a decade. Idiopathic. That's the word doctors use when they don't know the cause. She'd tried 3 different prescription inhalers, 2 different air purifiers, one of them a $900 unit that her son bought her for Christmas, and nothing was moving the needle. She was still waking up at 3 in the morning, coughing. She was still short of breath, climbing the stairs. She saw a video very similar to this one, built the crate over a weekend using materials from her local hardware store and a bag of aquarium charcoal from the pet supply store in the next town over. Total cost, she told me, was $34.11. She put it in her bedroom, and within 3 weeks, she was sleeping through the night. Within 2 months, she stopped needing one of her inhalers. Now, I am not a doctor. I am not making a medical claim. I am telling you what Marlene told me. And Marlene, for what it's worth, spent 41 years as a registered nurse and knows the difference between a placebo effect and an actual physiological change. She has since built a second crate for her sister, who lives in a mobile home with vinyl flooring that had been off-gassing for years. I get letters like Marlene's every week. Not always dramatic, not always life-changing. Sometimes it's just, hey, my house smells better, or my kids stopped waking up congested, or I noticed I'm not sneezing as much when I sit at my desk. Small things, human things. The kind of thing you don't need a clinical trial to notice because you live in your body and you know when something has shifted. Here's what I want you to understand about the economics of this. The average American household spends between $200 and $800 a year on indoor air quality filters, purifiers, replacement cartridges, essential oil diffusers, plug-in fresheners, HVAC service calls, the whole industrial pantheon of stuff. Over a lifetime, that adds up to somewhere between $12,000 and $40,000 per household for air, for the very thing your body needs every 4 seconds to stay alive. Now consider that your breathing box, once built, costs about $6 a year to maintain a new pound of charcoal every 2 years, occasional replacement of the cotton pre-filter, the same bag of zeolite continuing to work for 4 to 6 years. $6 a year compared to $200 to $800. Over a 30-year period, you save between $6,000 and $24,000. That's a used car. That's a down payment on a piece of land. That's a year of community college for your kid. That's real money. And it's being extracted from you quietly, month by month, because someone convinced you that clean air is a service instead of a birthright. And I want to be honest with you about the counter-arguments, because I don't want you to walk away from this video thinking I'm hiding anything. There are things the commercial purifiers do that our crate does not do, and I'm going to name them plainly. First, a HEPA filter certified to the H13 standard captures 99.95% of particles down to 0.1 microns. Our crate does not do that. Activated charcoal is not primarily a particulate filter. If your specific concern is fine particulate matter, say you live next to a wildfire zone or you have a family member with severe silica exposure, you should have a HEPA element in your home. The good news is you can add a basic HEPA sheet, the kind sold as replacement material for hospital-grade filters, costs about $15 and can be layered into your crate between the pre-filter and the charcoal. Total system cost goes up to $45, still a fraction of the alternative. Second, commercial UV purifiers claim to kill airborne pathogens through short-wavelength ultraviolet light. There is some evidence for this, though the effectiveness in a typical room-sized application is heavily debated. Our crate does not do this. If pathogen reduction is a specific concern, for example, if someone in your household has a compromised immune system, you can add a small UVC bulb inside the crate, oriented so that air passing over the charcoal is also exposed to the light. A 12-watt UVC module costs about $18. Add it if you need it. Third, some commercial purifiers include ozone generation as a feature. I am telling you plainly, do not do this. Ozone is a lung irritant. It damages tissue. The fact that ozone generators are still sold as air purifiers in some markets is, in my opinion, one of the more egregious ongoing failures of consumer product regulation in this country. Our crate produces no ozone. It could not produce ozone if you asked it to. That is a feature, not a limitation. Now let me tell you about something the crate does that no commercial purifier can do at any price. It ages with you. It becomes yours. The wood darkens, the joints settle. The smell of the cedar shavings mixes with the faint scent of your home, of your cooking, of the people who live there. 10 years from now, this crate will still be running. 20 years from now, if you take care of it, it will still be running. It is not a disposable object. It is a piece of infrastructure, the same way a good cast iron skillet is a piece of infrastructure, the same way a well-built wooden ladder or a hand-forged garden trowel is a piece of infrastructure. You will pass it down, your grandchildren will inherit it. And they will know, because you told them, that it was built one Saturday in your garage for $30, and it did the job that the $400 machines could not do. There's a phrase that keeps coming back to me as I talk about all of this. Sovereignty. It's a word we usually reserve for nations and governments, but I think it applies at the level of the household too. Household sovereignty, the idea that the basic functions of keeping a family alive and well, clean water, clean air, warmth, food, light, should not require a monthly payment to a distant corporation, should not depend on the goodwill of a firmware update, should not be held hostage by a supply chain that runs through 6 countries and can be broken by a container ship stuck in a canal. The crate is one piece of that sovereignty, a small piece, but it's real and it's yours, and once you have it, nobody can take it away from you. Let me give you a few more historical fragments before we close this out because I think they matter. In the year 1900, the average American home had exactly 0 air purifiers, and yet the rates of childhood asthma were roughly 1/10 of what they are today. Now, there are many reasons for that difference. Outdoor air quality was different in complicated ways, diet was different, home construction was different, but one of the biggest factors, and one that hardly anyone talks about, is that homes in 1900 breathed. Air moved through them, walls were not sealed, windows opened, chimneys drew. There was a constant, gentle exchange between the inside and the outside. Modern construction, especially since the energy crisis of the 1970s and the push for airtight, energy-efficient envelopes, has essentially turned our homes into sealed boxes, great for heating bills, terrible for indoor air. The average modern American home has an air exchange rate roughly 1/5 what a home in 1920 had, which means every VOC, every particulate, every combustion byproduct, every bit of off-gassing from every synthetic material in your home is being concentrated and recirculated instead of being flushed out. That's why indoor air quality has become such a critical issue in the modern era, not because the outdoor air is dramatically worse, in many ways it's dramatically better than it was during the industrial era, but because we've stopped letting our homes breathe. The crate doesn't solve this problem completely. Nothing in a wooden box can perfectly replace the passive ventilation of an old farmhouse, but it goes a long way. It gives your sealed modern home a working set of lungs. It becomes, in a very literal sense, the diaphragm of your house, pulling air in, scrubbing it, sending it back out into the room. And when you multiply that by 3 or 4 crates across a typical home, you get an air exchange and filtration profile that starts to approach what our grandparents took for granted. One more story, and then I'll let you go. My grandfather, who I mentioned briefly earlier in this series, kept a wooden box very much like the one we've built today in the cellar of his house in western Pennsylvania. He called it the breather. Just the breather. I remember asking him what it was when I was about 7 years old, and he opened the lid and let me look inside. Layers of black charcoal, some kind of pale gravel underneath, and a small hand-cranked fan that he would spin twice a day, once in the morning and once at night, to move air through the material. He told me it kept the mold down, he told me it kept the mice away, he told me it made the potatoes last through the winter. What he didn't tell me, because he probably didn't know the chemistry, was that he had built himself a functional air purifier and food preservation system using nothing but principles that had been passed down to him from his own father, who had been passed them from his father, going back to a family in rural Silesia in the 1860s. 6 generations of quiet knowledge sitting in a cellar in Pennsylvania, doing its job while the world above forgot it existed. That is what we're doing here. That is what this crate represents. Not an invention, not a hack, a remembering. A pulling back of something that was always there, waiting, patient, ready to work the moment someone decided to build it again. So go build it. Go to the hardware store this weekend, get the pine, get the charcoal, get the zeolite, spend your $30, spend an afternoon with your kids or your spouse or by yourself, drilling holes and stapling mesh and layering minerals into a wooden box. And when you're done, put it in the room where you sleep, or the room where you eat, or the room where the children play on the floor, and know that you have taken something back. You have done something small and quiet and profoundly consequential. The air in your lungs right now, as you listen to my voice, is the same air that will be in your lungs tomorrow morning and next Tuesday and next Christmas. It is the substrate of your entire life. Every thought you have, every conversation, every kiss, every laugh, all of it is happening in a medium of air. And you have the right to make that medium as clean and as pure and as healing as it can possibly be. Not because a company gave you permission, not because a subscription is current, because you built it yourself from materials the earth provided, using knowledge that belongs to every human being who ever wanted to breathe freely under their own roof. Tell me in the comments where you're going to put your first breathing box. Tell me what room, what corner, what part of your home is going to be reclaimed first. And tell me, if you would, whether you have your own family story, a grandfather with a cellar box, a grandmother with a charcoal jar in the pantry, some memory of the old ways that got quietly walked away from somewhere along the line. I want to hear those stories. I read every single one, and every so often I share the best of them in future videos, because that lineage matters. That chain of memory is what we're rebuilding here, one crate, one comment, one household at a time. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with the person you know who needs it most, the friend with the newborn, the sister with the asthma, the neighbor who just moved into a new construction home and can't figure out why they feel foggy all the time. This information wants to move, it wants to spread. It wants to get out of the corner of the internet it's been hiding in and back into the hands of ordinary people who can use it. Next week, as I mentioned, we're going into the root cellar. We're going to talk about the specific type of sand, its name, its source, its properties that the Amish and the Old Order Mennonites have been using for generations to keep root vegetables crisp and firm from October through August. 11 months of storage, no refrigeration, no electricity, no chemicals, just knowledge, applied correctly, using materials that cost almost nothing. If that sounds impossible, wait until you see it. And bring a notebook, because there are 3 specific details in that method that most people get wrong, and getting them right is the difference between a cellar full of good food in July and a cellar full of rotted mush in December. Until then, breathe, deeply. Breathe on purpose. Breathe air that you have made clean with your own hands. And remember that every generation before yours knew something worth passing forward, and every generation after yours is counting on you to pass it. The crate on your workbench is a small link in a very long chain. Make it a strong one. I'll see you next week.